We are going to call the regular meeting of March 12th, 2019 to order at 7:12. Everyone is here, so let us stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. So, if we could adopt the agenda, Ms. O'Brien.
Yes, ma'am. I move that the governing board adopt the agenda with the exception of consent agenda item 5H to be for separate consideration.
I second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 So, we will start with. Oh, sorry. Is there anyone who just really wants to start those governing board reports? Oh, Miss Frank, go ahead.
No report.
Okay. Sweetie, can you top that?
No report.
Okay.
Pressure's on the other three.
Well, I'm in full-blown lacrosse mode season, so my kids have taken up all of my extra time. But I was able to pop by the Business Connects breakfast briefly, and it was a wonderful breakfast. It was very well attended. So shout out to Monica or Mrs. Allred for putting that on. I heard very positive feedback from parents that were in participation. So thank you so much for doing that. And I think that's about it.
Well, thank you, Miss Reed. Mrs. O'Brien?
Ditto to Mrs. Allred. That was an excellent breakfast for our business and community partners. I would also like to give a shout out to Mountain Ridge High School, Hillcrest Middle School, and Copper Creek Elementary, who hosted me yesterday. I had a great time visiting their campuses, getting to see what our students were doing in some classes, and got to stop by the Spanish room at Mountain Ridge that has couches instead of desks, which is great for conversation, and got to read with a couple of kindergartners at Copper Creek, so it was a great time. I also would just like to share a quick story that a teacher shared about the Stand Up, Speak Up, Save a Life, and that was one of her students went home after that event and spoke to her mother about a classmate and friend who was in despair. And the two of them went to the classmate's parents, had a conversation, and that young lady who was in despair received some help because that friend was willing to stand up and share. So, kudos to the founders of that event. Kudos to our district for sending students and staff from all of our schools, and mostly kudos to that young lady for not just hearing the message but putting it into action. So that was just really profound to hear that story and know that just shortly after it, we were able to impact somebody's life. So thank you all. And for folks who might be watching just right now, I would encourage you to go back and listen to the safety presentation that was given in the 6:30 part of our pre-meeting, because there was a lot of good information in there from our staff. So thank you, Dr. Zerbach and Mr. Warner, who I think has exited the building.
Thank you, Mrs. O'Brien. So I will give a shout out to Greenbrier. I was able to help with setting up their spring carnival. Goldwater and Vista Peak made my week last week. I did get to bring little Willow Piper the pig, or Piper Willow the pig, over to Goldwater for their assembly, and I can tell you that bringing a little piggy to an assembly may sound easy, but you have to make sure it's quiet for them. And when Mrs. Kreidel asked the kids to be quiet. Every one of those kids was quiet, and you could hear a pin drop. And it was so impressive that it was just a request, not a, oh, you've got to be quiet. They just said the piggy needs quiet, and they stopped talking. So that was awesome. And Scap got to kiss the pig, so that was another cool part about that. A thank you to our students that came and spoke last week. Typically, we might have kids talking about how they need a 3D printer or something else, and we find that typical. But I found the courage of these students to talk about something so personal yet is right out there. It was something that I appreciated, that somewhere teachers, their parents, adults, someone around them gave them the modeling for that kind of courage to help what they're considering and what we might want to look at as marginalized students, because we don't want to have marginalized students. We want inclusion of everyone, and the only way to find out about it is to have those that are affected to speak. So I was very impressed with that. Sad that it goes on, but impressed that they're bringing it to our attention from their point of view. We've got proms coming up already. Crazy. So that's coming, and I cannot believe 4 board members did not wish everybody a happy spring break. What's up with that? Did you leave it for me? So safe, relaxing spring break, and it is always an awesome honor and pleasure to serve on the governing board for this district. Dr. Finch?
Most of my things I'm going to mention were on Twitter, so hopefully you were following me on Twitter and you would know all this good stuff. Yeah, okay, it works. It's legal. Just today, in fact, I had a chance to be on with ELA and math, part of a sweeps program, we're calling it, where we're checking in with a group of folks, and we had a really nice snapshot of what's happening for math and language arts. We did it at Deer Valley and Barry Goldwater. The last month or so, last couple of weeks. So me being a math major and an English minor, I've been able to jump in there and help out and really enjoy that. Conversations with Kurt was at Sierra Verde. There was a nice crowd there. We did a nice job there working with those folks, answering their questions. Read to Miss Rodriguez's 4th grade class. I think that was on Twitter as well. It was Read Across America Week. He did that. I had probably the biggest excitement I had in since the last time we met was teaching 30 plus 5th grade boys about manners after school, after they ran around the playground at 100 miles an hour. So you can imagine how that was. It was exciting with community ed students. They're all excited to. They just got out of class, and here's this new speaker. And it turns out it's the superintendent. So we had a blast doing that. And we learned about manners. And then hopefully all of you had the chance to go peek at the student art. But the outlets, they were amazing. And the superintendent's picks are in, so you'll be seeing that coming soon to a board meeting near you. And they'll be in our lobby eventually, framed and looking pretty. So those are coming. And then last night was the Diamond Canyon Night of Excellence. As you know, in our district, we have things like that pretty much every night. And so it's neat to show off what our students and our teachers do, and great interaction with parents in those environments. So that's it. Thanks.
Oh, is that Mr. Jim's part now? Well, take it away, Mr. Miglerino. It's all your show. And you can beep your horn or blow that horn if you want to do it when you start.
I'll save that for when I make a mistake, which probably go off often tonight. President Ordway, members of the board, Dr. Finch. So we have 4 reports to share with you tonight. 2 of them are standard monthly reports, starting with the student enrollment report through February 27th, 126th day. And so we are beyond the 100th day, and that's what we get funded on current year funding. We don't know exactly what our 100th day number is. We're still going through that reconciliation process with ADE, but a slight increase in the number of students. So we've been trending about 0.1%, 0.2%, through the first 100 days. We're up to 0.4% with this report. And so, unfortunately, more kids, more kids that don't yield any more revenue that come with them since it's after the 100th day. But I'd be happy to answer any questions regarding the enrollment report. Hearing none, maybe I'll move on to the financial reports for February. No real change since the January report. A slight increase in the projected carry forward, so we're just about 800,000. We were about 775, so month over month, an increase of about $25,000 in projected carry forward. Most of that $800,000 is coming from vacancies, so what we call staffing attrition. So that's good that it's creating carry forward, but the bad part about that is that means we're not fully staffed in several areas. So that number changes over time, as I mentioned. To maybe put it in perspective, year over year, we were about $870,000 this same period of time a year ago. So slightly down from that. But I also like to remind you that the budget amount for 18-19 did have a projection of a 0.5% reduction in students. I mentioned that we've been trending about 1/10 or 0.2% to the positive. So when we do the budget revision in May, that $214 million that you see for the bottom line budget, M&O budget, will be increasing, and therefore will potentially increase the carry forward if nothing else changes in terms of the trend that we've seen for the year. So be happy to answer any question regarding the February financial reports.
Ms. Reed?
Just out of curiosity, and you don't have to provide the answer tonight, but how many vacancies do we have in the district?
For a particular position or any position?
I'm just curious because you had mentioned that some of the carry forward was because we have vacancies. So I was just curious, what our vacancies look like.
And so that's a moving target, right? I mean, it changes by the day. But to put it in perspective, I think we have over 40 bus driving positions right now that are unfilled. Okay. So that's an example. On any given day, we could have several custodial positions. We have some teaching positions that are unfilled as well. If you'd like, we can have Human Resources provide a snapshot. It'll be a picture at one point in time
that would be
of
great.
the number of vacancies. Sure.
Thank you.
Ms. Tweedy?
The carry forward due to the unfilled bus driver positions, is that being offset by paying for private transportation though, or?
President Ordway, Ms. Tweedy, yes. So there are some other moving parts of this, and we are paying a premium. So even though there are some unfilled positions that you see, and we don't have a full year of using contracted services, especially for our extracurricular programs. We're doing that this year with contracted services, and even the contracted service folks are having difficulty covering all of those routes. But there will be an additional expense, and so we are tracking that as well. But yes, there will be an offset, and it will likely be a greater cost than the savings that we get from the staffing position, which I think was what you were saying.
So that hasn't been realized yet, so the carry forward will be reduced?
Potentially, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we do have an amount encumbered, but we don't have a full years of history to be able to encumber maybe the right dollar amount, but we are tracking that on a regular basis.
That's all.
And it's not just bus drivers. I'm sorry for the interruption, but we also have that in other positions that we're having difficulty filling. So insert nursing staff in there, and the list could be long. But we'll get together the list of the vacancies that we have at this point in time.
Thank you. You're not done though, huh?
Well, we have
even
two more
close.
reports to share with you.
2 more, you're halfway there.
The first report is a little bit easier than maybe the last report, but just due to the length. And I wasn't sure, I want to make sure I was covering as much of the topic as was being requested. But the first report happens to be the Budget Committee recommendation. So this is the second year, I think, that we've done the Budget Committee. So we've brought this information to you in the past. Or at least last year, there was a recommendation that came from this. We had 3 meetings instead of 4 this year. We had 2 surveys instead of 1. So we actually asked for stakeholders to provide initial input, and then we did a forced ranking survey of the budget options that the committee put together, and we were able to come up with a recommendation from all of that information. Wanted to give special recognition to the committee members. So you can see we had a good cross-section of individuals there, parents as well as employees. We do have a requirement that the employees are not part of the negotiated solutions team or our NST group. And so we made sure that that was honored when we had the membership worked out. These people gave up a great deal of time and had to endure listening to me ramble on some evenings. And if you're feeling left out, we recorded that, so you can go back and watch them at your leisure if you're having trouble sleeping one night or something. Just wanted to give special recognition. I think there is at least one person from the committee that was actually here. I don't think she wants to have me single her out, but the suggested budget priorities for 1920 this is the results from the initial community input survey. Just wanted to give a special recognition to our data analysis and organizational improvement department. Dr. Smith helps with all of our surveys and helped us immensely with these 2 surveys as well. This was a narrative survey, so these are much more difficult to compile, but we pretty much had some good consistency with some of the feedback. Just under 3,000 responses from a narrative survey. I thought that was a good number as well. Not that 3,000 relative to the total number of potential responses that we could have got, but 3,000 was, I think, representative of a good sample of stakeholders. The forced ranking survey, you can kind of see the breakdown between the majority, or 76% of those being parents, and then an additional 11% whether both were employee and parents. So about 25, maybe 2,600 of the 2,984, I think is the number, on the forced ranking survey, had some parental connection, and then I would add the employee and the employee parent, again, duplicating that count, but to say that there's about 700 that had some sort of employee connection of that 2,980 responses. This is kind of a heat map of the 14 items that we had them force rank, and this is a little bit, takes a little bit of explaining. We actually asked for their top 5, so anything that's in a darker orange or red color doesn't mean that it was scored lower, it just means it wasn't in their top 5. And there's I think a distinct difference there. But suffice it to say, the committee looked at all of this information, and I provided it here. I won't go into it in detail. We have the highest ranked responses and lowest ranked responses, which probably isn't the right terminology on the right-hand side of the bottom right-hand side of that slide, because they didn't rank them lower, they didn't rank them higher is probably more accurate, but that's confusing to be able to say it that way. We looked at this in a couple different ways. This is by stakeholder group. And we noticed there was a pretty distinct difference between maybe community members and some of the other stakeholder groups, but it was a pretty small sample. It's difficult to get community members that don't have some connection to us, even though thanks to our communications and community engagement department, they helped us push out the survey to a broader mass than just our parents or our employees. But we didn't get a whole lot of responses from the community. But we did look at it by group. We also looked at it by, who had which response had the number one, was ranked number one the most by each employee group, and then what was the top five. So was it in any of the top five by employee group? And you can see that the map doesn't really change a great deal in terms of the colors, if you will, by employee group, with few exceptions to that. From all of that, we also had about 300 and what's that number say? 382 comments, narrative comments, and we looked through that as well. Those are interesting. I don't think we want to make those public because they were not redacted in any way, and therefore, some people chose to really share their opinion about certain things. But suffice it to say that you can see just from this Wordle here that students, teachers, school, those types of things really were prevalent in the narrative responses. And from all that information, the committee developed this recommendation to share with you this evening. So there, and these are in order. When I shared some of the other results, they were just randomly provided, but this is what they thought was ranked in this particular order for this for next year's, the 2019-2020 budget recommendation is that there should be a salary increase for all employees. And then breaking that down a little more granularly, the teachers should be the highest priority in terms of a salary increase. We should address hard-to-fill positions so that we don't have some of the vacancies, part of a conversation we were just having when we were reviewing the February financial reports. And that a differentiated classified salary increase to address minimum wage increases, especially knowing that we're going to go from $11 to $12 as minimum wage in January 2020. So they wanted to be a little more specific than just saying salary increase for all employees. Reduce maximum class size, and we had a lot of conversation around this. And one of the things, this is an expensive proposition. So to put it in perspective, a -1 in maximum class size, so to go from a maximum class size of, let's say, from 28 to 27, and to do that across every grade level, it's approximately $2 million. And but we do have situations in which the maximum class size is very large, and it can happen in a number of settings. And so we think that there's a committee that might need to look at this because of the expense of just unilaterally reducing class size without maybe addressing where we have, I'll say, situations in which the number is greater than all of us agree it should be for learning to happen. And so there could be options. For example, we could look at multi-age combinations instead of just having a hard number for a grade level. And there's a lot of underlying things that need to be resolved. So I'm just giving a for example. I don't want people thinking that we're going to convert every large class to a multi-age class, because that doesn't work in some settings. But that's as a for example. The third item that they wanted is make sure that we have additional academic supports for students. And this is, as much as anything, this is to make sure that students that need additional time have that opportunity for additional time, and making sure that that's included in our plans for 2019-2020. Provide additional social emotional supports for students. You're going to hear that. You heard a little bit of that as we were discussing that with just before the meeting in that report. And then finally, addressing capital needs of the district with a possible committee to look at this. So we've already started the framework for, there is a board policy regarding elections, and a citizens advisory committee is required. So we have started the process to form a citizens advisory committee to look at a potential election in November 2019 for not only our capital needs, but also to potentially renew our M&O override, which will be in its 4th year next year, and they are only fully funded at currently for us 15% for 4 years before they start to get reduced. So this will give us an opportunity to have an election, and quite honestly, make sure that it's not part of an election during the 2020 year for a number of reasons. So that's the recommendation, and again, I just wanted to make sure that special recognition was given to those people that helped create this recommendation, but I'd be happy to answer any questions the board might have.
Ms. Tweedy has a question.
Okay, I do have a couple of questions. What do you think that they meant by provide additional academic supports?
President Orway, Ms. Tweedy, I think it was to make sure that there was enough opportunities for students to, if they hadn't learned a concept, that they had an opportunity to have more time to learn that concept. And so that included, as part of the discussions that we had, it included maybe just more time on that particular topic, or maybe even more time for them to extend their day so that they would have,
So more specialist support, maybe?
I think it included that as well, specialist support in certain
Or an
curriculum.
extension of the school day with tutoring provided?
That was part of the discussion, yes.
Okay, and then the next question I had on the maximum class size, well, I have a few questions and comments on that. So going back to the staffing report, and so we don't actually have less students in our classroom compared to our peers, but we have a lower class size with the Auditor General's report. So can you send us a list of how many teachers are included in that calculation the Auditor General does, but aren't in the classroom reducing class size? Like, just include that in a board report so we'd understand that.
I believe I understand the question. I'm just trying to think how we're going to formulate that. So every teacher is counted. It's aggregate number of teachers divided by the aggregate number of students, or just the other way around. But it's
What I'm trying to figure out is, so I know on the Auditor General's report, they take our total student population and they take all of our teachers and they divide it and they get an average class size.
Mhm.
But when we look at the staffing report we paid to have compiled, and it lists each grade and our average number of students in each classroom, and then it compares that to our peers, we're actually higher in quite a few grades with how many students we actually have sitting in a classroom compared to the class size by that calculation. And you said it's because you think we have more special area teachers. I just wanted a list of the teachers that don't, well, okay, so the non-roster teachers. I guess that would be an easy way to do it.
Yeah, I understand the question, but just to clarify, the Auditor General report gives you a student-teacher ratio. It doesn't give you an average class size.
That's what I mean. That's what I'm saying. The student-teacher ratio
is lower than the peers and the state, but our average class size, according to
on the report we paid to have done, we still have to review that at some point, but when it lists each grade level and how many students are sitting in the classroom,
Mhm.
our average is higher.
right.
We have a lower class size in what we prescribe for our class size, but we don't appear to be following it because we actually have more students in the class, according to that report.
Remember, that report is only 2 other schools. I mean, Jim talked about that earlier. Maybe you want to hit that a little bit too.
Yeah, so just a limited sample of, we didn't get as many people to respond to that as the Auditor General has in terms of their information. And that's all self-reported information, whereas the Auditor General's the same calculation for every district.
Well, I don't know if it's possible for us to compare our non-roster teachers, the number of teachers we have that are non-roster, to our peers or not. I don't know if you have access to that information.
We do not. They would have to volunteer it, and they did for the efficiency study that we did commission, but only just a select number of districts provided that information.
Ms. Brown, did you want to say something?
So I think if I could just get a list of the non-roster teachers, I'd just like to understand that better when we look at class size. And then just really quick, the other 2 questions I had when we look at ways to reduce maximum class size. And I don't even know if this is possible, but what would the cost be of providing the schools even with a reading and math teacher so that we could reduce that would teach multi-grade so we could reduce the class sizes during the course? So like if we had a reading teacher, or let's just say math teacher, and they went to a K-8 school, and 1 hour they taught first grade math, second grade math, third grade, and then during that period we'd have an ability to split the kids in extra direction during those quarters, so that we would actually reduce the class sizes substantially during core instruction. What would the cost on that be? That I know you can't tell me tonight, but just one thing I think we could look at.
Yeah, I'm not even sure how we would calculate that. That's why I said I think a committee needs to look at that in terms of other options such as that, or other creative suggestions for when we do have large class sizes and how to address that. So that's because there are certain parameters that need to be established to be able to calculate what the cost is. I mean, we know what a teacher costs if we could find the teacher, assuming we can find the teacher. But how do you determine when you trigger that?
I was just saying if you gave one to each campus that you could reduce the class sizes during course.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but this portion of the report is to talk about how things were ranked, and if the reducing the class size is something that we're going to go down, then we can have all of this.
I just wanted to throw that suggestion out, and then it's on topic. It's on his report. And then the final question was, with the emotional supports, were they aware of the emotional supports that are being added that were presented to us tonight?
President Orway, Ms. Tweedy, there wasn't a specific report that was provided, but there was general knowledge that some of that was ongoing, and not that, to the level of detail that was shared this evening.
And Darcy, I wasn't cutting you off or saying you weren't off topic, but in order to get into the ideas that you have, it would be at the time that we have scheduled, so we could all come up with the brainstorming. Your ideas are great, so I just wanted you to understand that. So please don't cut me off when I'm speaking the next time.
No, I've had it with the
did you-
rude
I'm
comments, Ms. Ordway. You were rude to me during your board report.
Speaking.
You cut me off today. I don't care. I'm talking over you. You do it to me every week. I'm about done with it. I've been professional to you, and you can knock it off.
Okay, you're done now. Thank you. Mrs. O'Brien, did you have something?
I'm good. Honestly.
Anybody else have a question? Ms. Frank?
I just had a comment. I think it does make a lot of sense to look, when you're reducing maximum class size, to look at areas where you actually have more of a problem than other areas, because I don't think it's even all the way across the boards. An example would be high schools. And I know that they have different scheduling needs, so I think the idea of a committee to explore that further is excellent, and that's my comment.
Mrs. O'Brien?
Apologize. The committees that you're talking about on this report, are they going to be put together in order to provide us some feedback prior to the budget coming to us, Dr. Finch?
That's probably a Mr. Migrino question, because he probably got the pulse of the committee. Thinking off the top of my head, they would not be able to pull that off in that time frame. So I'm thinking big picture, long term, getting from all corners of the DVUSD globe, getting something that is big picture, because obviously these thoughts are not new to us, and if they are, for example, using Ms. Tweedy's example, that has many variables in it, so we would need a lot of brains to put that together. So I'm thinking it's more start on it now, maybe more for next year. I don't know, Jim, if you have a thought on that. Do you think they could pull it off in a month?
President Ordway, Ms. O'Brien, I think I think the committee wouldn't be able to come up with all of the potential options that would be necessary in the time frame for us to be able to incorporate it for the 1920 budget. But I don't want to speak for somebody else. I think this is outside of my area of expertise, quite frankly, to be able to say, hey, what options should be explored. I think what we hear, that this is a very popular amongst just the general public that class size is of concern, especially if we have, you know, some unfortunately large classes, and I don't know if that's the norm, though. So are we trying to address, you know, individual situations, and maybe that could be an easier solution to implement, or is it more systemic, and it's going to take a lot more detailed look to come up with multiple solutions throughout the district? So I think it's actually the latter, so I think it's going to take more time for us to implement. But that doesn't mean that we couldn't start on it now, because it might take enough time that we might need to do it. And some of the solutions could be implemented mid-year, right? We talk a lot about student-teacher ratio, but maybe it's adult-student ratio, and potentially providing additional supports within a particular area without necessarily changing class size or adding another teacher per se to a homeroom.
Ms. Moffett deals with this every day. Maybe she can enlighten with us.
I do agree with Mr. Migliorino that it does take time. There is a lot of data to collect from our peers. Our ASPA organization collects this information, and recently they did share classroom sizes. I could gather that and share with you what has been reported recently. We are not a huge outlier. Some of them are much higher than us, and a couple are right in our range. Maybe one that I recall off the top of my head was lower than us. Another thing that we do know, and this is just informal conversation with my peers, is that we do closely monitor on a weekly basis. As you know, we've provided you those reports with the process that we use to monitor our classroom sizes and to provide staffing to address any overages. That is not something that is practiced in other districts as tightly as it is for ours. So I think that it's worthy of noting that we do care about this very much. It is something that we talk about in NST, and I think that that is probably the appropriate venue to discuss it in, is in language, and we could definitely put together a subcommittee. I think Maria would probably be in agreement with that could gather some information and bring it to that team, and then that team would bring it forward to you for consideration. Classroom sizes are in the certified manual, and you approve that on an annual basis.
Okay. I appreciate that clarification. I just want to make sure that folks who are either watching or who look at this report, maybe we could have that updated, that that would be for the following budget year, so they don't think that this is going to get accomplished in this short time period and think that we'll be able to have those big ideas before the 1920 budget rather than the 2021 budget. I do appreciate you looking at that and clarifying how Deer Valley does follow that. Thank you very much.
Any more questions? Comments? Jim, we have no more questions for this report.
Okay, we have one last report, and I'm just going to apologize in advance for the number of slides. And just give some recognition for some folks that actually put this information together. I saw this presentation and thought it was fitting for the question that was asked about procurement options for construction projects, and our colleague over at the Mesa Public Schools, Karen Fleetwood, put this together in conjunction with one of the general contractors, Chase Building Team, and they were kind enough to share it with us so that we could share it this evening with you. In terms of options, the one thing that we've had, I think ever since the procurement code was put into place, is a low bid requirement. That's one option. It does create some adversarial situations. We are maybe have experience with a lot of low bid procurement, including some of these pitfalls where we were not able to avoid them ourselves, including lawsuits and things that got rather expensive. So along came the opportunity for alternative delivery methods, is what it's technically called. So construction manager at risk is one option, design build is a second option, job order contracting a third option, and then finally select bidders list. We have used all of these alternative delivery methods with the exception of design build. And I think as you find as we go through this presentation, we try and fit the job to the alternative delivery method that best serves the needs of that particular project. And that was in there twice, sorry. There's some additional legislation that we have to follow that help with record keeping and disclosure for these alternative delivery methods. And we have further gone to the extent where we make sure that all of the participants that are scoring these things sign affidavits to make sure they're not disclosing information to particular providers that could be vendors or because you'll see that sometimes these aren't always district employees that are helping us evaluate these responses. Here's the actual statute or the section of the procurement code that allows us to consider these alternative delivery methods, specifically the construction manager at risk. And here's kind of the steps, if you will, to procuring a construction manager at risk. The large projects, we have done construction manager at risk because we feel that it does create a less adversarial relationship with the general contractor and the team, the architect, as well as the district itself. But some of the benefits include, kind of assisting with the development. So there's a constructability review in part of the pre-construction services so that we get somebody to help oversee what the architect is drawing to be able to say, hey, there's a different way to create that same effect with the project, and it might be more cost effective to do it that way. Or if you reduce this by 2 inches, we can save X amount of dollars, those types of things. It also allows them, the contractor, which is the construction manager at risk, to help recruit the best subcontractors, which we have found almost imperative with the labor market that exists today in the construction world. So it's hard to get people to bid on projects if you don't have a relationship with them, especially if it's a small project, because there's just so much work. They can be very selective in the work that they choose. The idea is from pre-construction phase to do some homework. I think the adage is to try and put in the effort early on so that hopefully we don't have as much effort during the construction phase. And that truly has been something that we have realized as a district. As I mentioned, we don't use design build, but it is an option that we could use. It does help accelerate the schedule. And in effect, the major change here is that the architects and engineers actually work for the general contractor. So we hire a general contractor, they hire an architect, and then the architect is an employee or a contractor of the general contractor. We haven't used that because unfortunately we like to have some autonomy and more of a three-legged stool where we have an architect, a general contractor, and then the district being all three legs of that stool. And we don't know that there's a lot of benefit to the design build, although it can accelerate the process of design because the general contractor is already on board, actually on board first before the architect is established. Again, one point of contact, and if it's a critical procurement, we've noticed that this is where we've found that it would be advantageous to use. We just have not been able to marry it with any of the projects that we've been doing. Job order contract, there's the procurement code for this particular option. It does save a significant amount of time and has the potential to at least identify the expense portion and tie it to an index, if you will. So there is some price assurance with that. And there are some cooperative job order contracts that exist, so it does allow for us to expedite the process to be able to make a decision. And then finally, select bidders list. So this is a competitive method in which there's qualifications that are determined for a select number of those people that are going to actually hard bid a job. Typically what happens is you'll narrow a field down to, let's say, 5 finalists through their qualifications. You'll then provide a set of plans. They all bid that same set of plans, and whoever is lowest of the 5 then gets the job. So you get kind of a hybrid model here in which you're using qualifications to make sure that you have somebody that you have a reasonable assurance can do the work, but then you're pitting them against 4 others to make sure that you get the best price. We have done select bidders list for projects, not on large-scale projects, but certainly with our summer projects and things of that nature, summer improvements where we're using bond dollars to make some of those improvements, we've used select bidders list. And I'll say with mixed results. So you get all of the benefits that I mentioned of kind of a hard bid and a construction manager at risk, but you also get some of those negative things that come with each of these. So you just have to be careful to make sure that it fits with the project that you're doing the work on. Again, selecting the method that basically provides whatever purpose you're trying to achieve. To give you a perfect example of this, we used a job order contract when we expanded the student parking at Sandra Day O'Connor High School several years ago. The reason for that was we had an immediate need. We were working with the city to change some of the parking arrangement on the public street. We needed to move quickly to address a safety concern, and so we used a job order contract to accelerate that process and get the parking lot done sooner as opposed to later. Who is on the review team or who's going to be involved? This is a situation that can be unique for each district as to who would be involved in the process, but it's not a singular person. I think that's what's important to note here, is it is a team. We typically review responses with a 5-member team. Usually involves somebody from our facilities department, somebody from our technology department, myself, an architect, usually the architect of record for the project, and then we use a general contractor that's not affiliated with the project. I mentioned that we're doing some documentation, including a non-collusion form, the conflict of interest discussion, to make sure that because, again, the architect of record and the general contractor would not, on the review team, they wouldn't be district employees, that they're signing these affidavits to make sure that they understand the rules that we're all bound to follow. And here's the procurement code that actually identifies that you have to have at least 1 school district representative, no more than 7 members, a senior management employee of a licensed contractor, and 1 person who's an architect or engineer, a registered architect or engineer, and I think that's important to note. Again, we typically use a 5-member committee. This is just further clarification on the contractor and their role, so they can't have a vested interest in the project one way or another, and cannot also bid on the project. We have to provide ample notice, and there's certain information that must be contained within the documentation as we issue the solicitation, which is issued from our purchasing department. And here again, additional information required in the solicitation. So I think the question as it was originally posed to us is, what are the options that are available? And I think it was in the context of having a conversation about the new school. And so what option are we, I think there might be a couple more slides here. For some reason this is not clicking quickly through this. Again, here's the process itself, is we would issue a request for qualification, identifying the scope of the project and a scoring matrix, so it's pre-identified how we're going to score those things before we even receive the responses. There can be an interview. It's not required. We typically don't interview because we know many of the folks that are submitting these, so we typically do not do the interviews, but it is possible that you could have interviews to be able to help make the selection. And then, then the award is made. And it's interesting to point out that through this process, when you do a qualification-based solicitation, that price cannot be part of the consideration. But it doesn't mean that you're going to automatically pick somebody based on their price. It just means it's not part of the selection process. But if you can't reach an agreement with them on price, then you're allowed to go to the next lowest responsive respondent. So you can't use price as a selection, but you can use it to disqualify somebody. So it's so interesting component of it. I think there's supposed to be some best practices on this slide here. Again, establishing a predetermined scope. What is how much money do you have allocated to this particular project? What are you trying to accomplish? Make sure that the GMP, or what we call the guaranteed maximum price, is established in the agreement, and to make sure that that if there are going to be any change orders, it's only going to be to potentially maybe return savings on the project. There have been an occasion where we've exercised a change order on a construction manager at risk, but that was because we added scope to a project, which is also allowable as long as it doesn't increase the price by a certain percentage. Make sure that there's some contingency involved, because especially when we do the modernization projects, we're going to talk about the Hillcrest project later this evening, that there are going to be some unforeseen conditions, so you have to make sure that those can be addressed. And then be upfront about things like, what your expectations are for the how the work is going to be performed on site. These are, again, just kind of some best practice things that we take into consideration, especially when you have to coordinate with other outside entities, whether it's municipal review or utility relocation, things of that nature. The school facilities board are all parts of the process that needs to be provided, are taken into consideration, and looking for opportunities. I mean, the reason that we're looking at Hillcrest this evening is because we hope to get started during spring break. So we're looking for opportunities where we can be less disruptive on a campus, and again, with a partnership arrangement, we can set some of those expectations as we establish them with the successful award E. Job order contract, again, there's multiple job order contracts that are on cooperative contracts, so that there's a lot of ease of that to get to them. It's all based on a price index. Typically, RS means is what's commonly used, so there's consider this the Kelly Blue Book of construction costs. And many of the contracts have open book pricing fee schedules in them, so they basically have a coefficient that they're going to use of that Kelly Blue Book. And you can use other indexes, but there has to be some form of index in a job order contract. The beauty of the job order contract is just the speed, the sheer quickness that you can respond to a particular project, and it can be so quick that sometimes that can cause other problems because maybe you don't have the scope well defined or some of those things. So just a cautionary point here to make sure that you're not moving so quick that you forget some of the steps in the process. And then it is an open book process, so the other thing that's that is suggested as a best practice is to make sure that you audit all of the costs in connection to that index. Here's just kind of the steps of a job order contract. Again, These aren't unique just to job order contract processes, but you can kind of see how they're laid out here. Again, negotiating that coefficient or the index, making sure the fee schedule is established. Again, developing a contingency is a best practice. Make sure you have a PO in place so there's a contract. All the insurance is in place. Again, these are usually fast-track projects, so you have to make sure that those boxes are all checked. And this is just kind of maybe a tip that we like to share, that even though summer seems like it's far away, we start summer work in January, just because of the amount of work that it takes to procure these contracts and make sure that we have the scope refined. So I think that's the last slide. And then I'll go back to, because it wasn't clicking before, I was going to ad-lib there. But I think, as I was mentioning before, this is, I think in the context is, as we were talking about the new school, is what process are we going to use for the new school? The board did approve the architect for the project, so we do have that part done. There is the potential for us to use an alternative delivery method, like a construction manager at risk, potentially for this project. But there are some changes that are in the procurement code and some of the statutes associated with that are connected to those procurement code references that I shared with you, in which if they aren't changed this legislative session, then we'll be required or limited into what some of those alternative delivery methods are. So, for example, the statute as it reads today and would be implemented as of July 1st July 1st of 2019 would say that all projects have to be awarded to the lowest responsive bidder. So you can't necessarily use construction manager at risk to be able to verify or validate that law, although that law may subject to be changed this legislative session, but you could use the select bidders list to satisfy that requirement. Because you would have a lowest responsive bidder of the shortlisted group of people. We have not made that determination as to how we're going to proceed, and it will certainly depend on legislative changes and the timing of when we need to open the school, which has yet to be determined. So I'll be happy to answer any questions about alternative delivery methods.
Has everyone caught their breath? Any questions? Ms. Reed. Oh, no, Mrs. Reed. Mrs. O'Brien. You have answered all of our questions. You're a great person there.
Complex issue with many variables. And obviously, too, I think Mr. Miglino hinted to it, but I personally believe, and he does as well, that they're going to change that low bid piece. We're getting all kinds of feedback from legislators who had good intentions, but the unintended consequences are enormous.
And just so you know, there'll be our 52 questions coming towards you later on in the week.
Feel free to email them to me, and I can or pass them along to Mr. M.
Have no public comments?
No public comments, Mrs. Ordway.
Go on to consent agenda, please.
Consent agenda. I move that the governing board approve consent agenda items 5A through 5I, with exception of 5H for separate consideration.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Oh. Hold on a second.
Okay.
Thank
She
you.
took
Thank
it
you.
for you. Okay. 5H is the water line breaks emergency procurement. I move that the governing board accept the emergency procurement report outlining water line repairs at both Barry Goldwater High School and Las Brisas Elementary School on February 9th and February 22nd, 2019, respectively.
Second.
I just wanted to tell you why this was considered separately. When we see the word emergency, I think it's good for the public to understand what emergency, what that meant. So
Mr. M has those answers.
Yes.
President Ordway, members of the board, Dr. Finch. So yes, and this does give us an opportunity to recognize some of our staff that make sure that our facilities are up to standard. So we had on 2 separate weekends, 2 separate campuses, we had water line breaks, one at a high school, one at our elementary school. And unfortunately, many times this happens and we have the staff and we'll try and, fix this ourselves. But on both these weekends, our staff were unavailable for a number of reasons. Thankfully, they have lives outside of their Deer Valley responsibilities. But unfortunately, it happened on the weekends that we just needed them for these particular instances. And we would have caused a disruption on both campuses, and a disruption at a high school campus is never great. It was bad enough that it was on a weekend and there was already activity happening at the school, but we were able to relocate anybody that was going to be in this particular building. It was a fire line that needed to be repaired. The repair was outside the building. There was no damage per se to either of the campuses, so it wasn't a water line that ruptured that caused a flooding. It was a water line that was leaking badly enough that it needed to be repaired in order for it to continue to be left in the on position. We contacted a couple different vendors to be able to find out who would be available, and we were fortunate, even with a late notice on Saturday afternoon, that we were able to get one contractor to come out on Sunday and actually do the work and hand dig, because on Sunday there wasn't anybody able to get out there to blue stake, which would be required to dig safely and to make the repair. And we had such a good success with that company. We ended up using them at the second school as well. So it put us over the $10,000 requirement. And as per the procurement code, in which we've provided the references here, it requires either the board to have a special meeting to approve this, which we didn't think was necessarily appropriate, or you have to approve the report that we provided in the packet. And that's what we're asking for the board to do this evening. I just want to give special recognition to the school staff at both of these campuses, as well as our facilities department. Even though we didn't have our facilities trades to be able to do the work ourselves, our plumbers and operators to be able to dig this ourselves, we did have staff at both campuses that helped supervise this work, and we were able to get both campuses up and running for Monday in both instances. And I'd be happy to answer any questions the board might have.
I don't think we really have any because we read that all, but I just thought with the word emergency that it would be great for the public to know that we are on top of things. So with that, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Employee travel. I move that the governing board approve all employee out-of-state travel per governing board policy GCCE.
Second.
Are there any questions? Does anyone need to go through anything, or can we just take a vote? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Approved proclamation declaring April 7th through 13th, 2019 Volunteer Week. I move that the governing board approve a proclamation declaring April 7th through the 13th, 2019 to be Volunteer Week in the Deer Valley Unified School District.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 So read this. Whereas the entire community can effect positive change with any volunteer action, no matter how big or small, and whereas volunteers can connect with local community service opportunities throughout our schools, and whereas hundreds of volunteers working in our schools utilize their time and talent daily to make a real difference in the lives of children and adults. And whereas during this week, all over the nation, service projects will be performed and volunteers will be recognized for their commitment to service. And whereas during the This month, Deer Valley Schools will be recognizing volunteers for their commitment to students, staff, and whereas the giving of oneself in service to another empowers the giver and the recipient. And whereas experience teaches us that government by itself cannot solve all of our nation's problems, and whereas our country's volunteer force of over 64 million people is a great treasure, and whereas volunteers are vital to our students' future as caring and productive citizens. So now, therefore, I, Ann Ordway, serving as the president of Deer Valley Unified School District Governing Board, do hereby proclaim April 7th through the 13th, 2019, along with all of my fellow board members, as the annual observance of Volunteer Week. So clap for our volunteers. Yay! So let's go to 6C.
Contract language for our staff. I move that the governing board accept the administration's recommendation to approve the contract language for certified, administrative, exempt, and deputy superintendents for the 2019-2020 school year.
Second.
Do we have discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Moving along to 6D.
Addenda pre-approvals. I move that the governing board accept the administration's recommendation to pre-approve the addenda as presented.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Moving along to 6E.
I move that the governing board accept the administration's recommendation to approve the guaranteed maximum price in the amount of $6,950,000 for the Hillcrest Middle School modernization project to McCarthy Building Company using the construction manager at risk methodology.
Second.
Jim, did you have some words you want to share with us?
President Ordway, members of the board, Dr. Finch, I'm a little remiss. I didn't share with you guys maybe the good news of the GMP. I have provided that we did change the scope, and I just want to make that aware. I failed to provide maybe some insight as to what we are going to do, which I think would have been helpful. And I apologize for that. And there are a number of improvements that are going to happen at Hillcrest, but not all of the things that were originally thought to be done, unfortunately, due to the limit of the budget that we had established for this particular project. As we're getting into the later years of the 7-year plan from the 2013 bond authorization, we're seeing a lot of price escalation that was not accounted for when we first approved these projects. And consequently, we have reduced the scope, as I have indicated to you previously. And again, those are all the bad things, right? I mean, we're eliminating some of the improvements in the Building 200, which includes the media center and cafeteria. The reason for that is the media center did have a small renovation project about 10 years ago, and we feel that eliminating that building from the scope of work would allow it to be its own project in the future without a whole lot of more additional costs. We might be able to use one of those other alternative delivery methods that we spoke of earlier to maybe do a small jock contract over there if we were able to find some additional funds to be able to do that work. Most of the work there was going to involve some equipment upgrades in the cafeteria, and so some of the scope had already been diminished. In addition to the Building 200, also Building 900, which is the gym, which was built after the school was first opened, so it's newer. It is essentially being eliminated with the exception of some improvements in one of the side rooms that's not part of the gym proper, but it's in the same building. And we will be making some code improvements to Building 200, so we'll be adding fire sprinklers to that to make sure that it's up to code, but not making any other improvements. But the things that we are going to do, I think, is maybe the more positive way, the half-full glass, if you will. So all of the classrooms are being touched and improved. We're adding some STEM labs in some settings. We're making improvements to the band room that has multiple levels in it, creating maker space for our students to do great things, making some landscape improvements, making other safety improvements to the campus. Right now, to get on the roof, they have to use a ladder and go up over the parapet, so we're going to add roof hatches to every building. I think I mentioned there's a lot of hardscape in addition to landscape improvements that are part of what we're suggesting. Some safety improvements, especially with our front office in standards that we have for making sure that there's a separation between the public space and the secure campus itself. So there's a lot of exciting things that are happening on the campus. Unfortunately, it's just not everything. And we did work through multiple GMPs, or guaranteed maximum price, with the contractor to be able to find where we could get the most for the limited funds that we have established. And so the school is in agreement with the scope changes that I mentioned this evening. So I wouldn't use the word disappointed. I think they had expectations that we would be able to get everything done. Unfortunately, the market conditions as they are, and it saddens me to say this, but a $7 million project just doesn't get the attention that it used to when schools are being built for over $100 million in the Valley. We're not, we're fortunate to be partnered with someone like McCarthy Building Company. We know that they can get this work done. They are ready based on the determination that's going to be decided with your vote. They will actually begin the work starting this week and in earnest next week, even though it's spring break, again, pending the outcome of the board. We will be performing this work throughout the summer. This is the first modernization campus that is already at capacity, so we don't have a whole lot of space to be able to move students around on an active campus. There are 6 portable classrooms that exist that are being refurbished as part of this work to be able to move students into. At the conclusion of the project, we'll remove those portables because they're not currently being used for learning space. But we'll need them in the interim to be able to make the improvements. And I'd be happy to answer any questions regarding the project itself.
Ms. Frank?
This isn't really a question, it's more of a statement. It's important to me as a board member, if we're spending this amount of money on renovating a school, that we continue to support the enrollment. It'll be something we'll want to look at with the upcoming boundary discussion, so that we can tell our constituents, if we have to ask them for more money, that yes, we've spent the money and we are filling those schools that we've spent millions of dollars renovating. So that's not a question, it's just a statement. So, thank you.
O'Brien?
The portables that we're refurbishing to put students in while some of this work is going on, at the end of the project, where you said we would remove the portables. Where will they go next, or what will happen with them?
President Ordway, Ms. O'Brien, we think that they have outlived their useful life. So we are entertaining options to be able to maybe allow other people to acquire them somehow. Somebody that might have a different standard than we have for using them. So it might not be another school, for example, but they will be suitable for students when we do use them. We just don't think they'll be suitable for students over a long period of time, and so that's why. And we don't necessarily need them based on the student enrollment at the school. The school's full, but it was had more students when the portables were moved onto there. These portables are from like a era of 1980 is when they were built.
Okay, and they've been on the campus all of this time, just not in use more recently.
That is correct. I mean, Depends on your definition of in use. They were being used for storage, but they weren't educational space.
Yeah, my definition was by students and staff, but thank you. I do appreciate that
We're
clarification.
also leery too, if we move them, they might not be as valuable as well.
Got
Fall
it.
apart's a nice way to say that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Any more comments, observations, questions? Nope. Are we ready to vote? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
That moves us to our very next one.
Future governing board meeting dates. I move that the governing board approve the governing board meeting dates for regularly scheduled meetings for the 2019-2020 school year. And those dates are on the screen in front of you, as well as in your board book.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 And we're coming up to our preview. 7A.
The certified performance pay plan for the 2019-2020 school year.
Good evening, President Ordway, members of the governing board. Tonight I'm bringing a preview item for the certified performance pay plan for the fiscal year 20 school year, next school year. We bring this around this time every year for the following year, usually. One year we are a little late. As you know, this is motivated by the Classroom Site Fund and statutes around how you can use the money in the Classroom Site Fund. We have a committee of 10 members and myself as a facilitator. As you can see, there are 4 teachers, 4 school administrators, and 2 parents on the committee. And this year was we had a full, the committee completely full. So we only met a couple of times, and primarily because we found it at this point in the life of the Classroom Site Fund, as we move forward into a little bit of unknown as things are being decided with legislature, that we probably would keep the same performance plan. As a matter of fact, we did keep virtually the exact performance pay plan with a couple of word edits here and there. So the performance pay plan for this year, which we're going to then move into next year, had 3 components. We would split and calculate each component separately. The components, and this slide is wrong, the components consist of responsibility and PD hours at 25%, evaluations at 50%, and school letter grades at 50%. Mostly for the edification of a new board member. I'll talk about them just real quickly. Responsibility and PD hours are 20 total hours outside of your normal school day that you're putting back to the good of the school or the students. It could be either responsibility hours, performing a duty, or outside of your school day, or professional development hours. And in the plan itself, which you also have in your board book, is a list of possible items that could be used for both those responsibility and PD hours. Evaluations included the actual teacher evaluation they receive at the end of the year after their two observations, and we use standards 1 through 6 from that strong evaluation material. And then there is a cut matrix which says if you score at a certain level, you get 100% of that 50%, and if you score, and that level is actually 2.8 to 4. If you score below that, you go to a level of 85%. If you go below that, you go to 60%. If you score below 2.4 on that, you would not receive any of the money for that 50% proportion. There are also some elements that disqualify you for evaluations, such as being terminated, or not fulfilling your contract, or formal discipline. The final piece, also 25%, and I'll correct this before the second reading, are school letter grades. This is the portion we changed last year to use all of the districts' total school letter grades, all of them, and basically use this cut matrix, which was to say if 70% of our schools have a letter grade of A or B, that is B or better, then every teacher would receive the same amount. and it would be 100% of that 25%. If we fall between 50 and 69%, then they would receive 75%, and if we fall below 50% of our letter grades A or B, we're probably all out of a job, but they would not receive any of that money. In the plan, that if it does get to 0%, that money would then roll over to the next year's performance pay pot, as dictated by statute. Also, it has to be kept in that performance, in that classroom site fund, specifically for performance pay. Other than that, the committee is prepared with a communication plan, and we'll be communicating following the board approval. The communication plan primarily consists of a component for administrators, which will go out sometime later this year, and then, of course, the teachers, which we usually wait until we've kind of gone through this iteration of performance pay in case there are changes and we don't want to confuse them before we say, okay, this is what the next plan looks like. I'd be happy to answer any questions. We'll be bringing this back to you for approval at the next board meeting.
Mrs. O'Brien?
Can you tell us, Scott, roughly when the payout dates are for the three portions?
President Ordway, Ms. O'Brien, yes, with this plan, because it includes a letter grade portion, there will actually be two payouts. We have done this in the past, but not last year or the year before that. So there will be a payout for the responsibility hours and the evaluation sometime in late May, early June, and then there will be a payout. I probably should commit to early June for my payroll and benefits partners. And then there will be payout in the fall for the school letter grade portion. Early fall, October at the latest.
Thank you, and I apologize for not calling you Dr. Smith.
Ms. Frank, do you have a question for Dr. Smith?
I do. And this is separate, completely separate from the loyalty payment from the results-based funding. This performance pay plan.
President Ordway, Ms. Frank, yes, it
Okay.
is not.
All right.
It's a separate payment.
Ms. Reed, do you have a question for Dr. Smith?
Yes, Dr. Smith. For the parents and community members that are watching that may not know, could you explain who would get this pay, who is qualified or who's able to receive this, please?
President Ordway, Ms. Reed, I might ask Mr. Migliorino to make sure this wording is correct, but I believe the terminology or our classroom, our certified teachers, not necessarily the word classroom is not in there. So they have to be, and so that includes all of our classroom teachers, all of our special ed teachers, special ed teaching, and other certified teachers in the district, which there are a handful of them.
Ms. Frank?
Are there any groups that are excluded? Teaching people who might be considered certified teachers who would be excluded from the performance pay?
President Ordway, Ms. Frank, not to my knowledge.
Thank you.
Mrs. O'Brien? Oh, Dr. Finch, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I'm trying to think too. Dr. Smith was rewinding his brain. Mr. Migliorino, I saw the smoke coming out of his ears as well. To answer Ms. Frank's question, certified is the key word, and so I think that's what grabs the other folks that are not classroom-based. So I think that is the correct definition, so anyone that's not certified.
And then in the Friday update, you'll have the exact definition.
Good idea. We can give you an update if it's different than what we think.
Do we do any performance pay outside of this funding for other groups?
I think this question might be me. So the question was, do we have performance pay for any other groups outside of the classroom definition? And the answer is yes. So we have a district performance pay program, and it's based on 2% of your base pay if you qualify. So it's a goals-based approach for all other employees.
So there's no employees that are excluded from a performance pay plan.
President Ordway, Ms. Tweedy, that's correct. There's everybody has the opportunity to earn performance pay. There are different amounts, between the classified or from the what we call the district performance pay plan and the teachers that earn the classroom site fund performance pay. So those amounts are significantly different, but everybody has the opportunity, even part-time individuals.
Yes, Ms. Frank.
And then just to clarify, the other than the certified group, that performance pay, does that come from our M&O budget? I mean, I'm assuming it does. Whereas the teachers comes from the 301 funding.
Yeah, President Ordway, Ms. Frank, yes, that is correct. So the teacher performance pay is specifically from the Classroom Site Fund, which is a sales tax generated revenue specifically earmarked for that purpose. And the performance pay for the district plan is funded from our indirect cost fund. So not from M&O, but from one of our cash funds that we have.
Well, thank you for clarifying. I just wanted to make sure community members weren't confused and that they understood that the 301 money does go to the teachers and not to other groups. So thank you.
I think another, to emphasize Ms. Frank's point again, with results-based funding, it also had statutes which guide it. Actually, all these pots have different rules around it, so the results-based funding does as well. So I don't know, if, Jim, if you want to add any more to the results-based, our incentive plan that we have in there is guided by rules as well.
Yes, so the results-based funding, per the statute, the enabling statute, talks about school-based employees. And so we're using a definition that school-based that has a connection to student learning. So just to provide some differentiation of what that might mean in layman's terms, because I think everybody has a direct connection to the success of our students. But our cafeteria employees that could be school-based were not considered in that. Neither were our custodial staff, neither were the front office staff. But our paraprofessionals, our teachers, our school-based administrators, the principals, and that group, they were considered to be part of that. And that was a definition different than other definitions that we've had to consider in the recent past. So it's school-based, regardless of whether they're certified or not. And that's the loyalty bonus that we're speaking about.
Ms. Frank?
So I would just be curious, and if you could provide this in an update, if what the cost would be to provide some type of loyalty bonus towards those employees who are excluded from the results-based funding. So that, I mean, possibly looking at making sure that we're including everybody, but I'd want to know what the cost of that is.
Sure. And that obviously would come from M&O, so we can get that number for you.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
So just to go back to where we started, this was the preview for the 2019-20 Certified Performance Plan. So not to mix it up with all the other things that we just talked about. So if we have any questions about that, we can send you those questions.
Yes,
Okay.
surely.
Are we done then with this?
Thank you.
Well, where are we?
Future meetings are posted. I move to adjourn the meeting.
Second.
All those in favor are going to be
Aye.
And
Well,
we are taking
Yeah. We're going to take a break.
taking a 10-minute break.
Moving into a work session after.